Injuries. We all get them. There tends to be three different types: acute, overuse, and chronic. I'm going to detail an injury that I've picked up in the past couple of months and how I'm dealing with it. Now, of course, I'm going to say straight away that this is not medical advice. This is just how I am dealing with this particular injury, which is a bulging disc in my back, specifically the L5 and S1 vertebra. You can go on YouTube and see and search a multitude of more experienced, more knowledgeable physios, osteos, surgeons even. I've just had an MRI scan to confirm that this is an L5-S1 bulging disc. And what all the experts seem to be saying is they all liken this type of injury to a food, basically. Either an Oreo cookie or a donut. Now, I don't like Oreos, so let's go with the donut analogy. Basically, if your vertebra, your spine, is a stacked number of donuts, they can all compress straight up and down and work together. But if you repetitively strain that line, or having the musculature around the spine to support the movements left, right, basically out of the sagittal plane, then there's going to be a problem, because it's going to force pressure down on that donut at an angle which presses out the jam center in the opposite direction. And basically that's what's bulging out of the disc. That causes pain at that particular point, but also what is bulging out, that liquid jam basically, then affects the nerves around the area, sending pain signals down into your glutes, down into your hips, your pelvis, sometimes down into your legs, which is known as sciatica. This is what I'm doing in the gym and out of the gym to allow me to continue to train. So to give you some context, the L5-S1, or the lumbosacral joint, is where the lumbar section of the spine meets the sacral section, the sacrum. Now the sacrum is a fixed part of your spine, it doesn't move, whereas the lumbar spine does move. If you put your hand behind your back, you should feel that concave curve or that lordotic curve, which helps keep you standing upright and to attention. And then you'll feel that curve changes angle and dips back in, and that's where the sacrum starts in your spine. So obviously you've got an angle that's going to be working. One piece is fixed, the other isn't. If you start loading that incorrectly through repetitious movement, bad form with deadlifts, squats, or any other exercise that utilizes the spine, that's when this injury can flare up. For me, I'm pretty certain it's an overuse injury through too many ab exercises, in particular doing cable crunch curls with too much weight too regularly, in tandem with the rotation I was doing in the spine and area through golf, through tennis, and the squats, deadlifts, consistently training 6-7 times a week, just meant that those muscles around the spine weren't getting a chance to rest, they weren't getting a chance to repair and get stronger, so they were just fatiguing, and it was only a matter of time before those muscles weren't going to support the movement of those vertebrae. So once again, this isn't advice about what you should do, but I wanted to give some anecdotal evidence about what I'm doing that's helping me continue to train. Starting off with, in the morning, I always start with some dynamic stretches, warming up the body, and then spending 20 to 30 minutes on the bike. A lot more consciously, either prop my arms up as straight as possible so I have a straight back in a diagonal when I'm leaning forward, or if I'm reading emails, checking my phone, I will look up and keep my back as straight as possible, push that lumbar section of my spine out forward, my belly out, and tuck in my pelvis to keep that arch. And basically, like what all these doctors are saying online, it's as a way of almost forcing back in the jam that's come out of that donut. If you reverse the movement, if you reverse how you're holding yourself. I've also been a big proponent of standing desk for about 12 years now. This is just my current setup. Because it's mobile, I can move it around. It's not just one fixed desk. Make sure you don't find yourself slouching to one side, putting more pressure on one hip, because that's also putting more pressure on your spine because you're curving your spine to one side. Golf and tennis are probably my main sports. I've played golf since I could walk, and unfortunately, compared to what I'm doing in the gym, golf is pretty much off. All I can do at the moment is hit 3/4 length to full length pitching wedge up to about 8-7 iron without too much force, without generating too much torque in the swing, because holding that position of the diagonal spine, rotating it and forcing through that swing, it just leaves me in so much pain afterwards. So if you are a golfer or a tennis player suffering from a bulging disc or something similar, I would definitely try and lay that off. Build up the mobility and the exercises in the gym before returning to full swings. It's an unfortunate consequence of this injury, but if you treat an injury properly and accept that this small step backwards can allow you to keep progressing eventually, if you just take the time out, then that is the best mindset to go about this. In the gym, the warm-up is an ongoing warm-up throughout the session for me with the spine to keep it as mobile and as open and as fluid as possible. If you think of your spine being compressed and this bulging disc has been compressed, compacted, we want to create as much space as possible. A key one that I picked up from several other YouTubers like Athlean-X, as well as listening to a Huberman podcast, was firing up your glutes and basically your entire posterior chain with these leg waves, I'm going to call them. But basically what you want to do is send one leg out to the side and to the back, not just to the side. It needs to go at an angle, sort of a 45-degree angle, back and away from you. And what you're doing, you're now taking your limbs, your legs, out of the sagittal plane. If you think about all the exercises that you tend to do, like squats, lunges, leg press, and everything on upper body as well, you're working in one plane of movement, the sagittal plane of movement. Whereas this moves you into transverse, which is going to help support your spine and the movement, whilst also creating some more space in and around that spine and that bulging disc. So I'll do 8 to 12 reps each side, flaring that leg out to one side and then holding it there in position for about 10 seconds. I'll probably do this between 2 or 3 times during the entire session, as and when I feel I need it. And in terms of instant relief, there's nothing that has been better than that. Another one that's been recommended to me, and I've tried and can verify that it does help, are doing dead hangs, but with your toes actually touching the ground. Whereas in a normal dead hang, and you wouldn't be supported by the floor at all, what happens then is your whole lower body tightens in order to lock in your body and stop you swinging. And that's what we don't want, because that means there's a lot of tension in and around your hips and your spine and your back that isn't going to be relieved from this dead hang. So by having your toes touching the ground, it actually allows the rest of your muscles around your core and your back to release and to relax. Because I'm pretty certain that my injury through too many ab repetition movements, typical ab exercises are almost always crunch based. So I'm reversing that movement. I'm still doing leg raises, but for every set of leg raises I do what I'll call reverse leg raises, which is elevating myself on a box like this and only focusing on the movement from the floor to parallel. And as you can see, I've created an arch under my back where the lumbar section is. So basically that's being really tensed. It's forcing that jam back into the donut, if we go back to that analogy. And by only lifting the legs up to just past parallel, we're not then rounding the back and tensing the core, but they're still being worked in this position because they are supporting the spine. Counterbalancing this with normal crunches has helped me continue to work my abs. And for the upper body, most exercises remain the same. The only adaptation that I really find I need to do is with chest press, where I find that the curve that having my feet planted on the floor creates in my back really exacerbates the pain. So what I do instead is elevate my feet. I bring my knees up to my chest, but then I'll push them back further out again, so they're just past the point of my hips. And what that does is, again, create space. And because gravity is pulling down on my legs, because they're further away from the center point of my body, that creates the arch in the lower back for a perfect position for the chest press. And it also ensures that I'm not going to be rounding my shoulders because I haven't tucked my knees up to my chest and curled my body up, which is the key consideration to make sure that you don't over engage your shoulders, you're retracting your scapula and focusing on that chest press rather than getting all the other muscles in and around the area of the chest involved. Bent over rows are completely off, but there are enough rowing alternatives, machine-based or chest-supported with dumbbells. Moving on to lower body, I can still train legs. Squats are pretty much off though. I will test squats every leg session in the warm-up by doing goblet squats supersetted with stiff leg deadlifts. Basically, this is a great warm-up because it's intense. It works both the quads, hamstrings and glutes without needing to overload with too much weight. But I use it as a litmus test. But that said, if I do decide to squat, it will always be after I've fatigued the legs with at least one or two other exercises, namely the leg press and leg extensions, where my back is always supported. I'm locked into a seat. There's still a hip hinge, but I'm not bringing in or recruiting the back. I find that deadlifts, as you could probably guess, are not the best. But if I use a kettlebell, that kettlebell can be positioned closer to my center of gravity because it can be pretty much between my legs, whereas a barbell deadlift is always going to be just out in front of my shins and my knees in order for me to get that bar up. But because my hands are going between my legs to grab that kettlebell can be right underneath me. And what that does is relieve any excess pressure on the spine because you're not reaching out to lift that weight. And supersetting that with some rows, or you could do a vertical pulling motion like chin-ups. That gives you the intensity that a deadlift would otherwise give you, while still working all of the muscles that would be involved in the deadlift. They're just a few of the techniques that I'm using at the moment to try and make this work for me, so I don't end up sitting at home feeling bad, getting depressed, because unless you've severely broken something, some type of movement will always help an injury. It doesn't mean pushing it to the max, but moving around it, making sure the rest of the body doesn't overcompensate for that lack of mobility there. I hope if you do suffer from this injury at the moment, there's something there for you to try and potentially alleviate some of the symptoms and the pain that you're suffering from before you see a physio or a doctor or a specialist. And hopefully you and I can get a lot better, a lot more quickly, and get back to lifting to 100%. Thanks very much, guys. I'll see you soon.